Chapter 341. Title at the end. Seeing his annoying grin, Marco knew that he couldn't persuade this fellow to listen. With a helpless look, he muttered, "Stay alive then." Hearing him say this, Derek mumbled, "Say that to yourself, fool." Marco didn't bother to argue with him. There was still an enemy in front, so he kept his focus entirely on Horkel. Surprisingly, the old man didn't make another move. He just stared at them with a look of amusement. Marco could sense the contempt in the old man's eyes, but he didn't let it affect him. "I need to buy some time to let His Highness escape." Thinking about this, he opened his mouth and bellowed, "Warriors of Iron Sand Fort, create a path for His Highness to retreat." The crazed warriors of Iron Sand Fort stopped upon hearing his words. They abandoned their enemies and gathered around the second prince, defending him from all forms of attack. Giovanni was stunned when he saw this. "They are already tired, but they didn't even hesitate to protect me." For the first time in his life, Giovanni felt grateful, and he also vowed to take revenge for the warriors who had fallen. "I will remember your sacrifice. Once we have regrouped with the reinforcements, I will tear down the enemies and burn their corpses in your honor," the second prince shouted, his voice trembling with emotion. He who had always looked down on the commoners felt profound respect for these warriors. Unbeknownst to him, this event would also spur a change in his personality. Although weakened and injured, the soldiers of Iron Sand Fort carved a bloody path for the second prince's retreat. They used their bodies to form a defensive wall that prevented the troops of Harun from harming Giovanni. There was no hesitation in their actions. Derek was amazed when he saw this, and he couldn't help but comment, "You have trained a capable army, Marco. Not many great commanders can do that." It was a heartfelt praise for the Marquis, but Marco was in no mood to respond. He could feel his body weakening as the seconds ticked by. Knowing that his death was around the corner, Marco no longer hesitated. He threw himself into his enemy and brandished his sword, unleashing one final desperate blow. Whoosh! It was a quick slash. It was so fast that Horkel almost failed to react in time. Clang! By a hair's breadth, he managed to lift his hammer to block the sword that was just inches away from cutting off his head. He then snorted and swung his warhammer with tremendous force. Whoosh! In the nick of time, Derek appeared right before him to block the attack. Clang! Derek gritted his teeth. He unleashed his mana to strengthen his arms, but the unbridled force behind Horkel's attack was like an unending torrent. He could hear his bones snapping from the pressure. If it weren't for his mana, his arms would have already been turned into meat paste. D! Horkel roared, his eyes brimming with intense killing intent. Boom! Derek flew like a ragdoll and smashed into the broken wall, which caused it to collapse, burying him within. Seeing this, Marco flew into rage. With bloodshot eyes, he stabbed out his sword, aiming for Horkel's chest. "Pathetic. Do you think you can harm me without mana to supplement your attack?" snorted Horkel as he broke Marco's sword with a smash of his warhammer. Marco's right hand was pulverized from the attack, making him grimace in pain. "We tried our best, but this guy is a monster." He fell to his knee while looking at Horkel with a cold gaze. "Kill me," he muttered indifferently. The second prince had already retreated, and the civilians of Iron Sand Fort had been taken to a safe place. He failed to defend the fortress, but he had successfully protected the residents. Horkel unhurriedly walked towards him while playfully waving his warhammer. "Western Sword Marquis? You are nothing much," he remarked with a disdainful expression. "Don't worry, I will send you off with one hit." He raised his warhammer. However, a huge shadow suddenly cast over him. It was followed by a heavy, mountain-like pressure that descended upon him with no warning. "What is this oppressive aura?" Horkel lifted his head. Flying above the clouds was a massive creature, looking down at him with its beastly eyes. Its aura was so overwhelming that he was almost forced to kneel. Catastrophe-grade monster. Horkel's face was drained of color. He was absolutely horrified. He might be a peak transcendent, but against a catastrophe-grade monster, he was nothing but a bug. "Hold on." There is someone on top of the monster. He squinted his eyes and saw a figure standing on top of the creature's back. He wore a black and gold battle armor with a deep red cape that fluttered along with the wind. He is just a transcendent knight, but how can he command such a fearsome beast? He quickly sensed the other party's power, but it baffled him. He couldn't understand why a catastrophe-grade monster would willingly agree to become someone's mount. While he was reeling in shock and disbelief, he noticed the creature opening its massive maw. In the next moment, the beast spat out a burst of flame that burned the warriors of Haroun into ashes. Ah! Help! Ah! Some of the warriors who didn't die right away managed to scream, but their bodies soon melted under the intense heat. Seeing this horrifying sight, Horkel didn't even hesitate. He urged his horse to flee. No way! I can't die here! He could still hear the screams of his subordinates behind him, but he didn't turn back. Who in their right mind would fight a catastrophe-grade monster? He tried to convince himself that he did the right thing. Zephyr, grab that old fellow for me. I have some questions for him. A voice drifted into his ears, almost making him piss his pants. He heard a whoosh before he lost consciousness. Chapter 342. Helping the Injured Warriors. Marco, who had already accepted his fate, was stunned. He thought he would meet his end under Horkel's warhammer, but things had taken an unexpected turn. Who is that man? He mumbled as he watched the man clad in black and gold armor with a face filled with disbelief. He thought that he was dreaming and the things that happened were just an illusion conjured by his mind. However, the searing heat from the flames and the smell of burnt flesh told him everything was real. Looking around, the thousands of warriors from Haroun had been turned to ashes. There were still a few of them alive, but it wouldn't be long before they would meet their demise. Meanwhile, Zephyr had already captured Horkel. It even made a soft sound as if it was trying to please Alaric. You did great, Zephyr. Alaric wasn't stingy with his praise and complimented the beast. Bring me down first, he commanded the beast. Zephyr issued a sound before it descended to the ground with a whoosh. The warriors of Iron Sand Fort who had survived the battle ran away in fear. Although the catastrophe-grade monster had killed their enemies, they were afraid that it would attack them next. Seeing this, Alaric wasn't too bothered. He could also understand their concerns. After all, Zephyr's aura was just too intimidating. Even the people in House Silversword who were familiar with it were afraid of the creature. As soon as they got down, Alaric jumped off Zephyr's back and went to help the injured warriors. Looking at the large number of corpses from their side, Alaric was saddened. I came a bit too late. If I had come a little earlier, I could have saved some of them. While helping the soldiers, he inspected them through his appraisal out of habit. This was how he discovered Marco, the Western Sword Marquis. In his past life, Marco was an unsurpassable figure who had an illustrious reputation that was even above Lucas's. He was one of the few nobles who didn't choose to side with the two princes. Even until Alaric's death, Marco had chosen to remain neutral and continued to defend the western borders from external threats. Alaric admired his commitment to defending the empire. Please. There is someone buried under the rubble. Marco, who was receiving first aid from him, pointed at the collapsed wall. Hearing this, Alaric immediately followed his gaze. After advancing to the transcendent realm, his senses had been significantly boosted. He could hear a faint sound of breathing from underneath the rubble. All right, stay here and don't move around, Alaric reminded him before he rushed to the rubble. He lifted the big debris and soon discovered a figure buried underneath. The man was in bad condition and some of the sharp rocks had penetrated his body, making him bleed profusely. Seeing that he was in bad condition, Alaric quickly pulled him from the wreckage. He then administered first aid while sending a stream of his mana to stop the bleeding. Do you want to use appraisal on the selected target?
Alaric clicked, no.
This was no time to check the man's attributes, for his condition was the worst among all the people he had helped. With Alaric's effort, the man's condition soon stabilized. His bleeding had stopped and his breathing returned to normal. Now that he was in better shape, Alaric used his appraisal on the man. Derek, Transcendent Knight, EXP. 4666/5000. Potential S. Traits: horseback riding S. Swordsmanship S. Close combat S. Archery B. Hunting B. Tracking B. Assassination B. Poison immunity C. Winemaking C. Strength 389. Stamina 345. Agility 457. Vitality 338. Endurance 366. Mana 299. Alaric was impressed after seeing the man's high attributes and high-rated traits. Based on this alone, he was already comparable to Galliner. The only difference between them was that Galliner still had a lot of room for growth. Derek slowly opened his eyes and saw a young warrior in gaudy armor inspecting his wounds. "You are." He knew that this young warrior had provided him with first aid when he saw himself covered in bandages. Alaric smiled faintly at Derek and replied, "I am Alaric Silversword, son of Lucas Silversword. I came here with my troops to support the western borders. Well, they are not here yet, but they will be here within 5 days." The mission hinted to him that the situation on the western borders was urgent, so he urged Zephyr to rush here ahead of the troops. Derek was stunned upon hearing this. Lucas and House Silversword had gained fame recently after they had eliminated the Grand Duke. Alaric, who was revealed to possess the imperial bloodline, also became famous. Derek tried to stand up, but moving only aggravated his wounds, making him hiss in pain. "I apologize for letting you see such an embarrassing situation, Your Highness. I want to offer my respect to you, but my—" Alaric stopped him from explaining with a wave of his hand. He then smiled and responded, "There is no need to be sorry. You must recuperate first. You can offer me your gratitude once you have healed." Hearing this, Derek no longer felt burdened. "I am glad to see you alive, Derek." A voice drifted into their ears. Alaric turned his head and frowned when he saw Marco approaching them with much difficulty. The man was covered in wounds and they started to bleed once more. "Didn't I tell you not to move around?" Alaric muttered in a reprimanding tone. Marco was embarrassed, but he explained himself. "I'm sorry, Your Highness. I was worried about my friend, so I—" Alaric sighed and shook his head. He then beckoned to Marco and indicated for him to sit next to Derek. "You two stay here. I still have to question that person." While saying this, he looked at the old warrior was grasped by Zephyr's claws. The two transcendents followed his gaze, but they didn't dare stare at the massive beast for too long for fear of angering it. Chapter 343, Mission Not Complete. Horkel slowly opened his eyes, and the first thing he saw was a hideous-looking beast staring at him with unconcealed ferocity. Recognizing the beast, he struggled to break free from its grasp, but he was unable to move its paw, which was pressing down on him with heavy force. It was then that he heard a series of footsteps nearby. He instinctively turned his head and saw a young warrior clad in gold and black battle armor. He exuded a unique charm that commanded awe and respect. With his temperament alone, Horkel could tell that this young warrior held a significant background. "Who are you?" he asked, whole feigning calmness. The other party had kept his life, so he believed that he could make his way out through an exchange. His mind spun as he thought of what information he should provide them with to have them guarantee his safety. "Release him," Alaric calmly ordered. Zephyr understood his command, so he lifted his giant paw, but he still kept his eyes on Horkel as if to warn him not to make any rash moves. Of course, Horkel wasn't stupid enough to attempt an escape when a catastrophe-grade monster was just a meter away from him. Alaric looked down at the old warrior and said indifferently, "You must be Horkel, the man known as the Heavy Hammer of Harun." Horkel stared deeply at Alaric, trying to see through his intentions. He nodded and replied, "You are right, my lord. This old one is indeed Horkel. May I know what you need from me?" Sensing his tension, Alaric chuckled. "I just have a few questions for you. I hope you can answer them truthfully. Depending on your answer, I might consider sparing your life." Hearing this, Horkel wasn't in a hurry to respond. He looked straight into Alaric's eyes and cautiously said, "I can answer your questions, but you must swear upon Aru's name that you will set me free and keep me safe." Alaric turned silent. This old warrior was very cautious, and it didn't look like he would answer him without fulfilling his request. "I promise you that I will keep you safe." Alaric nodded indifferently. Horkle shook his head. "That is not enough. You must swear upon Aru's name." Alaric furrowed his eyebrows. This old man was difficult to fool, and he had no intentions of sparing his life. After much thought, Alaric let out a sigh. "What a pity!" Looking at Alaric's expression, Horkle felt uneasy. "Wait!" However, Alaric didn't give him the chance to speak and ordered in a cold voice, "Kill him." Hearing this, Horkle felt a wave of terror grip his heart. He wanted to flee, but he found himself restricted by an invisible force. In the next moment, he saw a huge gaping maw approaching him. He couldn't even scream and was bitten to death by Zephyr. With one bite, the beast devoured the transcendent knight, leaving only a pair of feet that were still wearing boots. Alaric's face twitched upon seeing this. Zephyr was too scary. Luckily, the beast was very docile in front of him. It was even more obedient than the saber-fanged wolves he had taken as pets. Looking at the bloody pair of boots, Alaric clicked his tongue. Too bad. He spared Horkle's life because he wanted to get some information from him about the location of Harun's troops. Alaric's mission was still active, which means that he was yet to complete the task. There are many cities and villages near this fortress. Where should I begin my investigation? Alaric was deeply troubled. He couldn't do the investigation all by himself. His only choice was to leave a message for his troops, informing them to head out separately to several key cities and villages. Thinking about this, Alaric wasted no time. He walked towards Marco and Derek, who instinctively flinched upon meeting his gaze. "I cannot stay here for long. I have a feeling that Harun has sent their troops separately, so I must head to the other cities." Alaric told them his decision to leave. The two Transcendent Knights didn't object to this. The situation here had already been settled, and all that was left was to deal with the aftermath. "We thank you for your help, Your Highness. Once we have fully recovered, we will visit North Pine Town to thank you in person." Marco wanted to offer him a fist-palm salute, but he remembered that he had lost a hand, so he was at a loss. Alaric noticed his unusual expression, but he pretended not to see it. "My troops will arrive in a few days. I want you two to inform them." Alaric instructed them on what to do, and he also gave them a few reminders. A moment later, Alaric hopped onto Zephyr's back and ordered it to fly. The beast let out an ear-piercing roar. It then flapped its wings and flew into the sky with a whoosh. The two injured Transcendent Knights watched the massive figure with complicated faces. "It seems like the two princes have gained a formidable adversary in their quest for the throne," Derek offhandedly remarked. Marco didn't say anything, but he shared the same thoughts as him. There will be great changes in the Empire soon. Meanwhile, Alaric was unaware of their thoughts. While standing on top of Zephyr's back, he looked down while searching for traces of enemy activity. "If you sense something, inform me immediately," he told the beast. Zephyr made a sound to acknowledge his command. In the blink of an eye, they had already traveled tens of miles. Alaric saw several cities, towns, and villages. However, he didn't sense a trace of battle. Half a day later, he arrived at the borders of another fortress city called Black Wind Fort. It was a fortress smaller than Iron Sand Fort, and its military was also weaker. Even so, they still had a Transcendent Knight stationed as their commander. Upon closer look, Alaric discovered that an army of 10,000 warriors was marching towards the fortress. Chapter 344, Utterly Crushed. Despair was plastered on the faces of Black Wind Fort's warriors. However, despite their fear, none of them retreated. They stared at the approaching enemy troops, silently resigning themselves to their fate. "Hold your head high. You are soldiers of Estania. Even if we die in today's battle, we will be welcomed by Aru in his divine kingdom," shouted a bald and muscular old man wearing heavy steel armor. This guy was the commander of Black Wind Fort, a newly ascended Transcendent Knight. Upon hearing his roar, the soldiers puffed up their chests, their spirits lifting up. "Commander is right. Even if we die, we will die with honor. For Astania, Alaric, who was hidden behind the clouds, smiled upon hearing this. Black Wind Fort only had 2,000 soldiers, and half of them were just ordinary warriors with no mana. Compared to the enemy troops who had 10,000 warriors, it was inevitable for them to face defeat. For them to be this loyal to the Empire speaks volumes about their commander's personality. Although the muscular old man wasn't that strong for a transcendent knight, Alaric still respected him for not choosing to retreat in the face of certain death. At this moment, the troops of Haroun had already stepped within the range of Black Wind Fort's artillery and archers. The battle began. Their fierce shouts echoed in all directions. Alaric didn't wait any longer and commanded Zephyr to descend into the enemy's formation. Whoosh! Everyone was startled when they sensed the presence of a powerful monster. They subconsciously lifted their heads. When they saw the massive draconic lion exuding overwhelming energy, both sides were flabbergasted. A catastrophe-grade monster. What? What is it doing here? Could it be a tamed beast of Haroun? While everyone was silently speculating the identity of the beast, it suddenly swooped down towards Haroun's formation, startling their troops. In the next moment, it spewed a pillar of fire that burned everything in its path. Screams of panic and despair echoed across the vast plains. The arrogant warriors of Haroun fled in fear, causing chaos in their ranks. "What in the world is happening?" muttered the muscular old man standing on top of the wall. His eyes flashed with utter disbelief and horror. It wasn't just him. The warriors of Black Wind Fort had worse expressions. They were enveloped with fear, with some of them visibly shaking. The scene in front of them was akin to the burning pits of hell. The screams of their enemies and the sight of them burning into ashes was like a nightmare. It was for a long while that the muscular old man finally discovered that a warrior was standing on top of the ferocious beast. Just which esteemed warrior could it be to command such a terrifying beast? He mumbled, his voice carrying a trace of veneration. The other party didn't attack them, which means that he was on their side. For this reason, his fear vanished and was replaced with strong devotion and admiration. "The beast is on our side. Do not be afraid, everyone. The capital has sent us reinforcements," he shouted, his words greatly reducing the fear in everyone's hearts. At this moment, half of the 10,000 warriors had already been killed. The remaining half were scattered in different directions, so it was difficult to kill them off one by one. Left with no choice, Alaric shouted to the troops of Black Wind Fort, "Warriors of Astania, don't let the enemies escape. Kill them all." Hearing his words, the warriors of Black Wind Fort simultaneously glanced at the muscular old man, waiting to hear his instructions. Sensing everyone's eager eyes, the old man smiled ferociously and shouted, "My brothers, follow me to kill the dogs of Haroun. Kill them all." A moment later, the old man led a cavalry unit of 800 warriors. They were like a pack of wolves chasing down their prey. Meanwhile, the ones left atop the walls weren't idle. They loaded their artillery with large boulders and fired at the fleeing enemies. On the other hand, the archers rapidly released their arrows, killing hundreds of enemies in the process. With the help of Black Wind Fort's troops, Haroun's 10,000-man army quickly fell. There were a few hundred who managed to escape, but Alaric was too lazy to chase them, so he left the task to the hot-blooded warriors under the muscular old man. The mission is still active. Alaric frowned when he discovered that he still hadn't gotten his rewards. While he was in deep thought, he sensed someone approaching him, so he quickly ordered Zephyr to descend. "May I know the esteemed lord's name?" the old muscular old man asked with a bow. He wasn't a noble, so he didn't mind bowing to someone, especially when he had a terrifying beast as his mount. Alaric glanced at the old warrior and responded indifferently, "I am Alaric Silversword, son of Lucas Silversword." Hearing this, the old warrior was stunned. He didn't expect that this young transcendent was actually the heir of House Silversword. Wasn't he 20 this year or something? How come I feel that his strength is above mine? He could subtly feel the familiar aura of a transcendent knight from Alaric, but he didn't dare confirm his thoughts. 20-year-old transcendent knight? I must be going crazy. So it's your highness. The old warrior bowed in gratitude. Thank you for your timely help, your highness. This old man will forever remember this life-saving grace. If you ever need my strength, you can send someone to inform me, and I will come running for you. Alaric smiled at his words. What is your name? He had already seen the old man's name through his appraisal, but he asked to prevent anyone from being suspicious. Replying to your highness, this old man's name is Nile. The old warrior responded respectfully. Nile, is it? I will leave you to handle the aftermath. I will take my leave first since other cities are also being attacked. Farewell. Without waiting for his response, Alaric jumped onto Zephyr's back and commanded it to fly away. Whoosh! Nile watched them disappear into the horizon with a fanatical look. I finally found the one person I must serve. Chapter 345. Burming Island. Inside a mountain cave beyond Iron Sand Fort, 100 injured warriors could be seen nursing their wounds. Some lay completely motionless on the ground, while some were leaning against the wall groaning with a dark expression. Among them, the second prince was bandaging a warrior who had lost an arm. His eyes filled with complex emotions. This warrior was weaker than him, an ordinary elite knight. However, when they were escaping from the besiegement of Haroun's troops, this man didn't hesitate to jump in front of him and use his body to protect him. It wasn't just this man. To ensure his safety, many warriors had sacrificed their lives. Their selfless actions made him rethink whether he was worthy of their sacrifices. Thank you, your highness. The man forced out a smile on his pale face. Giovanni didn't know how to respond. He felt that he wasn't deserving of the man's gratitude. Looking at the prince's complicated expression, the warrior seemed to have understood his feelings. You don't need to blame yourself, your highness. We protected you not just because you possess the imperial blood. We believe that you are worthy of our sacrifice. I'm sure everyone here shares the same sentiments. Hearing this, Giovanni was stunned, disbelief written all over his face. Am I really worthy? He mumbled. The warrior let out a heroic smile and said, Your Highness fought on the front lines to buy time for the residents to retreat to safety. That alone is worthy of respect. Don't belittle yourself, Your Highness. You are a good man. You might have made mistakes in the past, but it isn't too late to change. Giovanni's heart trembled, and for the first time since he was born, he felt genuinely moved. To think that Giovanni, would feel this much joy to hear someone's words. Thinking about this, he tapped the injured warrior's shoulder. Get some rest. Yes, Your Highness. Giovanni went to help the other warriors, which greatly surprised them. They never thought that the arrogant second prince would actually lower himself to help commoners like them. This slowly changed their perception of him. Suddenly, they heard the sound of galloping horses outside the cave, alerting everyone. They grabbed their weapons and eyed the entrance of the cave with cold gazes. Wait, it's one of ours, someone shouted, making them feel relieved. In the next moment, 5 warriors on horseback entered the cave. What happened out there? Are you the only survivors? Inquired Giovanni as he approached them. The 5 riders got off their horses and bowed to him. We are glad to see you safe, Your Highness. To answer your question, the situation in the fortress has already been settled. Other than the 5 of us, more than 1,000 warriors are still alive, including the Lord Marquis and Sir Derek. Hearing this, everyone inside the cave was pleasantly surprised, but they were also baffled. Before they retreated, they were on the verge of collapsing, so how did they turn the tide against such overwhelming odds? As if noticing their confusion and doubt, one of the 5 warriors explained the situation that had happened. He recounted the sudden appearance of a young transcendent warrior who rode a majestic catastrophe-grade beast. The beast opened its mouth and spat out flames that. Everyone was fascinated by the story, and they could already imagine the scene of that battle in their mind. Unable to hide his curiosity, Giovanni asked, Were you able to ask the identity of the young warrior? He couldn't think of anyone that impressive in the younger generation of the Empire. The only one who came close was his cousin, Alaric, but the guy was only an elite knight. "It's His Highness Alaric's silver sword," the warrior responded. Giovanni widened his eyes, unable to believe his ears. Alaric! How could it be him? It wasn't just him, the ones in the cave couldn't believe it either. From their knowledge, Alaric was only an elite knight, so how did he suddenly advance to the transcendent realm in a short amount of time? Not to mention that he could now command a fearsome catastrophe-grade monster. They found it hard to believe. Giovanni grabbed the warrior and told him, "Is he still in the fortress? Bring me to see him." The warrior revealed a troubled look and replied helplessly, "His Highness left after dealing with the soldiers of Harun. He said that other cities are also being attacked, so he hurried to leave." Giovanni was disappointed to hear this. He wanted to go to the fortress and confirm the situation, but he couldn't bring himself to leave the injured warriors in the cave. "I see. Thank you for letting us know." 5 days had passed since Alaric left Black Wind Fort. He had already been to 3 fortress cities and helped them resist the troops of Harun. However, he still didn't receive a notification from the system. He was on his way to the 4th location, which was a newly built town on the western borders. Birming Island. I have never been there in either lifetimes. I heard that their town is surrounded by a lake. I wonder if it's true. From what he knew, the town was governed by a western viscount, but he didn't know which viscounty it was. While he was immersed in his thoughts, a magnificent island surrounded by a vast lake entered his line of sight. When viewed from above, one could see a developing town surrounded by tall earthen walls. There were also boats and ships around the island, possibly owned by the officials or residents of the town. However, this beautiful town was currently being attacked by over 100 warships, destroying the picturesque atmosphere. Surprisingly, the town was able to resist the enemy warships with its own maritime forces. To think that there is actually a powerful maritime force on the western borders. Alaric was taken by surprise. Although Birming Island's maritime forces were outnumbered, they possessed incredible weapons mounted on their ships, which slowed down the enemy's advances.
Chapter 346. Naval Commander Yeshin.
Who built those weapons? Alaric admired the highly advanced mana cannons which suppressed the enemy's 100 warships. There must be a high-ranking Beast Soul warrior in the town. Only Beast Soul warriors with specific integrated monster traits could engrave mana cannons with such destructive powers. Thinking about this, Alaric didn't immediately reveal himself. He wished to see the full extent of the mana cannon's capabilities. If I can have this design and ask the creator to build those mana cannons for our town. Alaric became excited when he thought of this. North Pine Town had only been established for less than 2 decades, so it didn't possess the heritage that most big cities have. He wanted to see their town equipped with the mana cannons to increase its defenses from external threats and also to act as deterrents against foreign invaders. While he was envisioning this future, there was a sudden change in the situation below. The enemy warships suddenly launched a counteroffensive, firing their artillery upon Birming Island's maritime forces. Boom! 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 Even from above, Alaric could hear the deafening sound caused by the explosion of mana. Seeing this, Alaric could no longer afford to watch. "Let's go, Zephyr. Aim your attack on those warships. Don't target those with blue flags." Hearing his instructions, Zephyr issued an earth-shattering roar before it swooped down with lightning speed. Whoosh! Unaware of its descent, the 2 maritime forces continued their battle. This was the first time Alaric had seen a naval battle, so he was intrigued by the tactics employed by both sides. In the next moment, Zephyr opened its massive maw and spat out a huge pillar of fire. Roar! It was then that both naval forces finally took notice of the monstrous beast flying above them. A catastrophe-grade monster. Is it an enemy? Everyone was shocked upon seeing the ferocious beast, spewing endless breaths of fire. Boom! Boom! Harun's warships exploded one after another, killing all the warriors within in the process. The Navy unit of Birming Island couldn't believe what they were seeing. The formidable enemy naval forces that threatened to destroy their island were now being destroyed without much resistance. Am I seeing things? I think I'm dreaming. Can someone hit me? Pa! Ouch! Why did you hit me? At this moment, the naval captain of Birming Island, a middle-aged elite knight with sharp facial features, was staring at the burning enemy ships with an inscrutable expression. With his sharp eyesight, he saw a man standing on top of the creature's back, his red cape fluttering against the wind. Which esteemed personage is that person for him to command such a powerful monster? He thought of some experts in existence, but no one matched the person in front of him. 15 minutes later, more than half of the enemy warships had already been destroyed. The remaining ones were fleeing back in the direction from which they came while firing their artillery at the draconic lion. Unfortunately for them, their artillery proved to be useless against the creature. Before their attacks could even land on its body, there was an invisible barrier that stopped their attacks, leaving it completely unscathed. After another 15 minutes, the remaining enemy warships sank to the bottom of the lake. The burnt corpses of the enemies could be seen floating around with the remnants of their ships. Soon, the massive winged monster turned around and looked its way in a certain ship. Alaric used his appraisal to search for the commander of Birming Island's naval forces, and he later found a middle-aged man who fit the image he had in his mind. This person was only an elite knight, but his traits and attributes were rated higher than most people in the same realm.
Yeşin Elite Knight EXP 477.000
Potential S. Traits: Naval Command SS, Ship Design S, Sixth Sense A, Swordsmanship B, Horseback Riding B, Archery B, Hunting B, Tracking C. Strength 177, Stamina 172, Agility 186, Vitality 211, Endurance 207.
Mana 202.
Alaric didn't even need to confirm to know that this was the commander of the naval force. The man's traits already revealed his identity. Unbelievable. To think that there is someone with an SS-rated trait in this island town. Alaric jumped off Zephyr's back and landed on Yi Xin's ship, startling his crew members. They drew their swords and surrounded Alaric with cold gazes. "What are you idiots doing? Stand back!" Yi Xin roared at his subordinates, cold sweat on his back. These guys actually dared to point their swords at someone who could command that terrifying beast. He was afraid that the young warrior would be offended by his subordinates' actions, so he quickly knelt to express his apology. "My lord, please forgive my foolish subordinates. They are still feeling shocked, so they don't know what they were doing." Alaric didn't say anything and just stood there with a faint smile. Yi Xin thought that he was displeased, so he immediately roared at his subordinates. "You bunch of fools! Apologize to this esteemed lord at once." Hearing their commander's words, the crew members finally realized their mistake and kneeled before Alaric while voicing out their apologies. This guy is truly talented. He could even command a group of disorganized men. Alaric secretly appreciated Yi Xin's talent. "You must be Yi Xin." He opened his mouth while staring at the naval commander with an unreadable smile. Yi Xin was taken aback. "How do you know my name, my lord?" He was just a commoner who had been promoted to become the commander of Birming's naval corps. He didn't possess any illustrious background, so he was surprised that the other party recognized him. Alaric's smile deepened as he replied, "I have heard of your exploits. Now that I have seen you in person, I can say that all those rumors are true." Being spoken in such high regard, Yi Xin was a bit embarrassed by his words. "Are there really rumors about me outside the island town?" "I don't deserve your praise, my lord." Chapter 347. Meeting the mayor and officials of the town. "Could you tell me your name, my lord?" Yi Xin hesitantly asked. He was curious about the identity of this young transcendent knight. His crew members also looked at Alaric, clearly eager to know him. Seeing their expectant gazes, Alaric chuckled. He had no plans to hide his identity, so he readily introduced himself. "I am Alaric Silversword." It was only a brief introduction, but the impact was immense. Alaric Silversword. It was a name that had recently become famous in the Empire. A member of the imperial family, a sword prodigy, a peerless talent that only appeared once every century. His illustrious name had already spread far and wide, so Yixin and his crew members were dumbfounded upon hearing his introduction. After recovering from their senses, they quickly greeted him with the utmost respect. "Your Highness!" Alaric smiled and waved his hand. "There is no need to be formal. The situation is still unpredictable, so why don't you bring me to see the town mayor? I would like to have a conversation with him." Alaric wanted to inquire about the mana cannons equipped on their warships. The best person to ask this was the town official. "I hope the mayor is not an unreasonable man," he thought to himself while looking expectantly at Yixin. The naval commander didn't disappoint him and responded enthusiastically. "It would be an honor, Your Highness. I'm sure the mayor will be thrilled with your presence." Hearing his flattery, Alaric merely smiled. The battle had already concluded. There were still some enemies who survived Zephyr's onslaught, but they wouldn't cause much of a ripple, so Alaric left the cleanup duty to Yixin's subordinates. A while later, Yixin brought him to the town. Along the way, he introduced the town's short history, to which Alaric listened with great attention. The one who holds the real power in this island town is House Jimena, which is helmed by Viscountess Michelle Jimena. Yixin gave him a short explanation on the hierarchy of Birming Island. Alaric raised an eyebrow when he heard that the household was led by a woman. It was rare to see a woman holding the reins of a noble household, especially in a patriarchal nation like Estania. He wondered what sort of character this Viscountess was. "Can I bring my mount with me?" Alaric suddenly asked. He didn't know what kind of dangers were hidden within this island town, so he would rather have Zephyr close to him to avoid unnecessary trouble. Yixin was stumped by his request. Alaric's mount was no ordinary creature, and its presence would scare the townspeople, so he was hesitant to agree. After much hesitation, he nodded with a stern look. "You can bring your mount here, Your Highness, but I hope that you can restrain it since there are many curious children in the town." Alaric nodded with a smile. He then brought his fingers to his lips and made a whistling call. Roar! A huge beast revealed itself, circling above the clouds before it descended to the ground. Whoosh! Everyone was intimidated by its ferocious appearance, making them subconsciously take a few steps back. Even Yixin, who was usually calm, felt nervous in the presence of the majestic beast. "Just quietly follow me so you don't scare the townspeople," whispered Alaric as he gently rubbed the creature's fur. Zephyr understood his words and nodded its head obediently. Seeing how docile it was in front of him, everyone couldn't help but admire him even more. This was a beast that could destroy hundreds of warships in just half an hour, but it was very obedient to Alaric. With Zephyr following them, the residents didn't dare get close, afraid that the beast would attack or eat them. A moment later, they saw a group of old scholars approaching them from a distance. "Your Highness, the fat old man with sparse white hair is the town mayor," Yixin reminded him in a whispering tone. "Amen," Alaric hummed in response. The mayor came with the officials of the town. When they heard the news that the newly recognized prince was here to visit, they left their office without hesitation to greet him in person. The officials were scared when they saw Zephyr walking beside Alaric. Seeing this, Yixin immediately reassured them. "There is no need to worry, gentlemen. This creature is His Highness' tamed beast." However, despite his reassurance, they were still afraid of the beast. Alaric didn't blame them. It was normal to fear monsters, especially one at the catastrophe grade. Led by the town mayor, the officials bowed to Alaric. "Greetings, Your Highness. Thank you for helping Birming Island defeat the enemy." Alaric waved his hand and smiled. "It is my duty as a member of the imperial family to protect the territories governed by the empire." They exchanged pleasantries before the mayor invited him to the town hall. Alaric didn't reject since he had something to discuss with the mayor. Seeing him agree, the mayor and the officials were happy. They introduced themselves one by one as they walked towards the town hall, which was only a few hundred meters away. The officials asked him if he wanted to ride the carriage, but Alaric rejected the offer since the town hall was just close by. Meanwhile, in another part of the island, a grand mansion stood, surrounded by tall metal fences with sharp tips. Inside a room in this mansion was a valiant woman who looked to be in her early 30s. Unlike most ladies who preferred to wear dresses, this woman wore light battle armor which made her look imposing and wildly attractive. She was staring in the direction of the town hall where she saw a massive beast descending. Earlier, she witnessed the beast destroying Haroon's warships like they were nothing but fragile toys. It filled her with fear and curiosity as to who could command such a fearsome creature. Knock, knock, knock. Hearing the knocking on the door, the valiant woman turned her head. Come in. The door is unlocked. Creak. Chapter 348. Michelle Catherine Jimena. An old warrior in his 50s stepped inside the room and bowed respectfully. My lady, I have a message from our subordinates. Hearing this, the valiant woman raised an eyebrow and gestured at him to speak. Go on. I am listening. She guessed that this was related to the owner of that beast. The old warrior lifted his head and with a stern voice he said, His Highness Alaric Silversword has come to our town. He is now heading to the town hall with the mayor and the officials. The valiant woman was stunned. She wasn't unfamiliar with this name since Alaric had become a sensation throughout the empire after his identity as a prince was revealed. Knowing that this was a big matter, she waved her hand and instructed, Prepare my horse. We will be heading to the town hall to pay our respects to His Highness. Yes, my lady. House Jimena might seem impressive to the eyes of the residents of Birmingham Island, but she knew that in the face of the grand political hierarchy in the empire, her household was insignificant. To truly gain a foothold and solidify her position, she would have to cling to someone more powerful. Now, an opportunity to get closer to an heir to the throne was delivered right in front of her doorstep. Only a fool would miss this kind of chance. With great haste, she stepped out of her room, not even bothering to change her clothes. She was afraid that she would miss Alaric if she wasted more time. The mayor and the officials brought Alaric to the VIP hall, which was specifically built to accommodate high-profile guests. Your Highness, we can't thank you enough for your help. The mayor and the officials expressed their gratitude once more. They sounded very polite. To their words of gratitude and flattery, Alaric responded perfunctorily because half his attention was on the system. He realized that his mission was still not registered as complete. Damn it! Just how many cities did Haroon attack? He was not in a great mood, but he didn't show it on his face lest it might affect his negotiations with the mayor and the officials. Alaric closed the system and sent the mayor a serious look, making the latter subconsciously straighten his back and adjust his sitting posture. Mayor, I will make it quick since there are still other cities that are being attacked by Haroon. He paused for a moment before he continued. I want you to give me the names of the engineers who built your mana cannons, including the Beast Soul warriors who engraved the abilities into those weapons. The mayor became silent at his words. Alaric didn't rush him and calmly waited. This wasn't a minor matter and it could affect the overall performance of Birmingham Island. After all, those engineers and Beast Soul warriors were the key reason why their island town managed to survive in the western borders, which was always faced attacks from foreign forces. Your Highness, can you give me some time to discuss this with Lady Michelle? I can't make the decision by myself. The mayor replied hesitantly. He might be the mayor of the town, but it was House Jimena who held control of everything. This was like saying that he was just a puppet official, but the mayor didn't seem to mind this. Alaric was about to respond when he sensed the presence of a few individuals entering the town hall. 5 elite knights. They must be from House Jimena. Alaric guessed when he sensed the imposing aura of the visitors. At this moment, a scribe entered the hall with an anxious look on his face. I'm sorry for disturbing your Highness, with his hands on his knees trying to catch his breath. What's the matter? Can't you see that we have something to discuss with His Highness? An official rebuked the scribe with a stern tone. Alaric raised his hand, signaling that it was all right. After catching his breath, the scribe said, Lady Michelle has come. Hearing this, everyone was surprised. Alaric had just arrived in the town hall, but she had already come. This showed them how vast her network was in the town. Let her in, Alaric told the scribe. Yes, your Highness. The scribe didn't linger and left in haste to invite Michelle in. Alaric was looking forward to seeing this Viscountess. He wanted to see what kind of woman she was for her to command such authority in Birmingham Island. Now that she is here, we might as well discuss this matter together. What do you think, Mr. Mayor? Alaric smiled with a light chuckle. The mayor laughed awkwardly. Half a minute later, the scribe returned with a tall woman wearing light battle armor. She had short, wolf-cut red hair and a pair of striking amber-colored eyes. She had slim waist and a toned body which were clearly a result of her intense physical training. Seeing her, Alaric immediately used his appraisal. Michelle Catherine Jimena, Elite Knight, EXP. 888/1000. Potential, S. Traits, Cold-blooded, S. Innate super strength, S. Shield mastery, S. Swordsmanship, A. Horseback riding, A. Archery, A. Intimidation, A. Hunting, B. Sixth sense, B. Strength, 250. Stamina, 230. Agility, 164. Vitality, 228. Endurance, 250.
Mana, 181.
Alaric revealed a look of interest upon seeing her traits and attributes. Just looking at her raw stats, she was built like Galliner, who was focused on defense. His unusual gaze made Michelle slightly uncomfortable. It felt like her secrets were being exposed. But this thought only crossed her mind briefly. She calmly walked towards Alaric and made a warrior's salute. "Greetings, Your Highness. I am Michelle Jimena. It is an honor to meet you." She had the mannerisms of a tomboyish lady, but Alaric didn't mind this. Alaric gestured for her to sit on the sofa adjacent to him. "You may sit." Hearing this, Michelle thanked him and briskly took her seat. As soon as she arrived, Alaric noticed the sudden change in the officials' behavior. It was like they were afraid of her, which wasn't surprising since she had the intimidation trait. Chapter 349. The Small Village. Michelle secretly glanced at Alaric. He looked like he was in his mid-20s, but from what she knew, he was still below 20. She also noticed another thing about him, his aura. He was like a sword in its sheath, silent and deadly. While she was observing him, Alaric opened up the topic he had discussed with the mayor earlier. "What do you think, Lady Michelle? If you accept my request, I will fulfill any conditions you set as long as they are within my means." Everyone turned their heads to Michelle, wondering how she would respond. To their surprise, the Viscountess nodded calmly as if it were a small matter. "That won't be a problem, Your Highness. Just give me the word and I will send those people to you as soon as possible." Alaric was impressed by her decisiveness. She didn't even hesitate for a second. However, Alaric didn't believe that she would do this for free. While rubbing his chin, he asked, "Tell me what you want in return." This time, Michelle was silent for about half a minute. No one said anything, afraid that they would disturb the negotiations. After a long while, Michelle finally responded, "I would like to keep this favor for the time being. When I have thought of something, I will inform you immediately." Alaric squinted his eyes, trying to see through her thoughts, but the woman remained indifferent. She was similar to those cold beauties depicted in the novels. "All right." Alaric smiled faintly. He then stood up and said, "I will discuss the specifics with you once I return. Haroun has attacked multiple cities in our western borders, so I can't stay here for long." Hearing this, Michelle politely asked, "Do you need any help, Your Highness?" Alaric shook his head. "There is no need. I can handle them on my own." With Zephyr at his side, the warriors sent by Haroun were no different than cannon fodder. Michelle didn't insist. "In that case, I hope you have a safe trip. Please inform me immediately if you need anything. In the western borders, my house Jimena still has some authority." She spoke confidently. Alaric thanked her. He might need the help of a local power, so getting her support would be great. After a few more words, he bid farewell to everyone and left the town hall. Everyone followed him, sending him off in the most respectful way. Alaric jumped onto Zephyr's back and instructed it to fly. The beast issued a roar and flapped its wings, causing a strong gust of wind. With a whoosh, it zoomed into the clouds and soon disappeared from everyone's view. Looking at the small dot on the horizon, everyone felt emotional. They thought that their island town would be besieged by the enemies, but Alaric's arrival changed their fate. His Highness is destined for greater heights. Estania will definitely prosper if he inherits the throne. Michelle mumbled with a deep gaze. No one dared to comment on her words. Only someone daring like her would speak about the throne in such a calm manner. Who would have thought that a trip to the western borders would allow me to meet some talented individuals? This must be predestined. In his past life, his faith wasn't strong, but after his regression, he realized that there were unforeseen forces that manipulated the world. Whether they were gods or immortals, Alaric felt that they existed. When will I have the answers for these mysteries? He thought to himself as he exhaled a deep breath. 3 days later, Alaric found himself above a small village inhabited by fewer than 100 families. This was one of the many villages not recorded on the maps for the reason that their existence was deemed as insignificant. The village was surrounded by wooden walls. Most houses here were made from mud and wood, indicating the villagers' modest living conditions. The reason Alaric stopped in this village was that he discovered a small army of about 200 warriors approaching the village. From their banners, he could tell that they were a small detachment force from Haroun, possibly there to gather information or to take supplies from the village. The village only had 30 warriors defending it, and the strongest among them was only a one-armed old knight. With the huge disparity in numbers, only destruction awaited them. Alaric turned his gaze to the small detachment unit from Haroun. They had 3 elite knights leading them. They also had 15 knights. The rest were knight apprentices and ordinary warriors. Why would Haroun send such a strong lineup to this small village? Alaric felt that things were a bit suspicious, so he decided to stand by and observe the situation. Is there something in this village? He thought, his eyes gleaming with interest. His guts were telling him that this small detachment unit wasn't just here to gather supplies and information. Thinking about this, Alaric instructed Zephyr to descend somewhere a bit further to avoid attracting attention. Whoosh! Alaric jumped off Zephyr's back. Stay here and don't let anyone see you. I might be gone for a while so you can just hunt on your own when you feel hungry. Just don't go too far. Understanding his instructions, Zephyr nodded its head. It knew that Alaric was trying to be discreet, so it didn't make any noise, earning Alaric's approval. After giving it a few more reminders, Alaric rushed to the village. He didn't intentionally hide his presence from the villagers, so the one-armed old knight sensed him approaching. The old knight was on high alert. He looked at Alaric with his arm resting on the hilt of his sword. Who are you? He couldn't gauge the power of the young warrior, making him feel alarmed. Dressed in his gaudy battle armor, Alaric stood out from the village warriors who only wore leather armor. Alaric raised his hand. I mean you no harm. I am a warrior from House Silversword. My task is to monitor the safety of the villages. Chapter 350. The Secret of the Village. House Silversword? The one-armed old knight frowned upon hearing this. House Silversword was located in the northernmost region of the empire, which was very far from their village. To an ordinary human, it would take more than a month to travel on foot. Even with a carriage, it would take them 3 to 4 weeks depending on the weather. Seeing his doubtful look, Alaric took something from his pocket. Here is a token to prove my identity. Alaric showed them a token which depicted the symbol of House Silversword. The old knight was a learned individual, and he had also been to the northern region quite a few times in the past, so he was familiar with the insignia of House Silversword. Upon seeing the token, the old knight couldn't tell if it was the real thing. He needed to observe it closely in case it was an imitation. Toss it here, he told Alaric. Alaric didn't mind his cautiousness and tossed the token to him. The old knight caught the token and inspected it carefully. The weight seems right and this material is legit. This is real. He is indeed from House Silversword. After verifying that it was real, the old knight relaxed his guard and handed the token back to him. Here is your token, my lord. I apologize for being rude. Alaric pocketed the token and nodded indifferently. We should head inside the village for now. There are enemies approaching. Hearing this, the old knight was stunned. Their village had scouts, but they hadn't received any word from them. Thinking about this, he realized that it had been a while since their scouts had left. Could it be that something happened to them? His expression darkened. Those scouts were trained by him and they were like younger brothers to him. He turned his head to his subordinates and shouted, "Summon everyone and tell them to get ready for battle." Hearing his orders, everyone was stunned, but they quickly left to relay his commands. The old man then invited Alaric to the village. "Follow me, my lord." Alaric nodded and followed him to the village. Can you tell me your name, my lord?" the old man cautiously asked. "My name is Alaric." Hearing this, the old man stared at him in shock. "Your high dash," he was about to pay his respects when he saw Alaric giving him a stern look as if warning him not to say anything. Understanding his intentions, the old man shut his mouth, but he was internally screaming. Alaric Silversword, the young heir of House Silversword and the third heir to the throne. Sometimes, small merchants would pass by their village to provide them with supplies and information from the capital. He heard from one of those merchants about Alaric. Knowing that he was dealing with a member of the imperial family, the old knight became more cautious. He was afraid that Alaric would be offended, so he was careful in every word he uttered. "What is your name, sir?" Alaric inquired. "This servant is called Rewin, your high ahem, my lord." The old knight replied subserviently. "Rewin, is it? Listen carefully since our time is running out." Alaric's voice became serious all of a sudden. "Yes, my lord. I'm all ears." Approaching the village are 200 Haroon warriors led by 3 elite knights. "What?" The old knight was terrified. One elite knight was more than enough to massacre their small village, let alone 3 of them? Not to mention that they had 200 warriors on their side. Just the thought of it made his scalp tingle in dread. "Don't panic. I will deal with them. I just want you to be honest with me." Alaric stared deeply at the old man. He had no way of confirming it, but he believed that there was something special in the village for them to be specifically targeted by a detachment unit of this caliber. The old man furrowed his eyebrows, looking hesitant to speak, but upon recalling Alaric's identity, he eventually nodded his head. "All right, I will answer your queries, my lord." "Good. Now tell me what is special about this village. Are you hiding something very precious?" Alaric bluntly asked. Rewin took a deep breath, his face darkening. Gritting his teeth, he decided to trust Alaric. "To tell you the truth, there is indeed something special in our village." Alaric squinted his eyes. "Go on." "I think those warriors are here for that child. She is a mix between a human and a dragon." "A dragon?" Alaric couldn't believe it. Dragons were revered beasts. They were extremely powerful and they possessed intelligence that surpassed mankind. According to the legends, they already possessed the strength equivalent to that of catastrophe-grade monsters at birth. As if having made a difficult decision, Rewin said with determination, "My lord, please bring her with you and escape from this place." Alaric could sense that the old man truly cared for the child, but he was still skeptical whether the words he had spoken were true. After all, he had never seen a dragon even once in his 2 lifetimes. "Where is the child?" Alaric stared deeply at him. Knowing that the situation was urgent, Rewin replied, "Please follow me, my lord. I'll take you to see her." "All right." Alaric nodded and followed the old man. They passed by a few mud houses and thatched huts before they arrived to an underground dwelling which was hidden beneath a barn. "Grandpa, you are back." A sweet and joyful voice of a little girl drifted into his ears. Rewin's stern face broke into a smile when he heard this lovely voice. In the next moment, a girl about the age of 3 came running towards them, her face filled with joy. "My lovely granddaughter, come here. I will introduce you to someone." Rewin took the girl in his arm and lifted her off the ground with one scoop. The little one glanced curiously at Alaric while biting on her finger. "Grandpa, who is that uncle?" Alaric's mouth twitched upon hearing this. Chapter 351. Dudu. Alaric looked behind him, but found that no one was there. Did she just call me uncle? Dudu, don't be rude to our guest. This young lord is Prince Alaric. You should call him your highness. Do you understand? Riwin corrected the child with a stern look. Dudu revealed a look of confusion, as if she were unable to comprehend all the information her grandfather had said. Pretending to understand, she nodded while keeping her curious eyes on Alaric. Okay. Alaric could only smile wryly at her innocence. Riwin smiled apologetically at him. Alaric observed the child, but he found nothing unusual about her until he used his appraisal. Dudu, catastrophe grade 17/10,000. Potential, SSS. Innate ability, gluttony, SSS. Purple heart flame manipulation, SSS. Dragon core, SS. Flame resistance, S. Innate divine strength, S. Superior perception, S. Mana gathering, S. Poison immunity, A. Strength, 700. Sealed. Stamina, 500. Sealed. Agility, 500. Sealed. Vitality, 500. Sealed. Endurance, 500. Sealed. Mana, 1000. Sealed. Alaric almost stumbled when he saw her outrageous stats. Furthermore, he discovered that she was classified as a catastrophe-grade monster. So Riwin is telling the truth. Her attributes are sealed. But what does this mean? This was the first time he encountered something like this, so Alaric was baffled. While he was silently inspecting Dudu's stats, Riwin's trembling voice drifted into his ears. Your Highness, Dudu must not be captured by those people. Her father. It looked like he wanted to say something, but he was hesitant to speak out. Alaric didn't ask him anything. Everyone had their own secrets, just like him. You don't have to tell me if you think that it is not appropriate. As for the enemies, I will handle them. After advancing to the transcendent realm, he had become more confident in his own abilities. He even felt that he could stand his ground against those renowned experts recorded on the Estanian Dragon leaderboard. Riwin still looked troubled. He didn't know where Alaric's confidence came from. To his knowledge, Alaric was only an elite knight, so how would he fight an army of 200 warriors led by 3 elite knights? While they were in the middle of a serious conversation, a grumbling voice echoed. Grandpa, I'm hungry. They turned their heads and saw Dudu wearing a pitiful look on her face while pointing at her mouth and patting her belly. Seeing how adorable she was, Alaric couldn't help but smile. Dudu, what would you like to eat? He asked while grabbing his leather bag which held all his rations. He had brought some meat jerky with him which he had gotten from one of the cities he helped. Dudu glanced at the leather bag he was holding, her eyes glistening with anticipation as she excitedly clapped her hands. Meat! Meat! I want meat! Dudu, don't be rude to His Highness. Riwin sweated bullets. Fortunately, Alaric didn't seem to be offended, making him feel relieved. It's all right. Alaric waved his hand, laughing lightly while giving Dudu a few strips of meat jerky. He wondered if she would like the taste of dried meat, but he soon realized that his worries were unnecessary. After getting the strips of meat jerky, Dudu happily rolled them to form a meatball before tossing it into her mouth.
Nom nom nom.
With a few bites, she swallowed everything down and let out a satisfied grin. She then stared at the leather pouch in Alaric's hand while biting her fingers. Seeing the line of drool dribbling out from the corner of her lips, Alaric chuckled and gave her more. This time, the little glutton didn't eat everything in one bite. She took the strips one by one, as if she were reluctant to finish them quickly. I'm sorry, Your Highness. Dudu has a huge appetite. The meat she consumes every day is more than what I eat for a whole week. Riwin smiled bitterly. If he weren't a knight, he might have struggled to keep up with Dudu's heavy meat consumption. Alaric felt pity for the old man and was also amused by Dudu's adorable face. Suddenly, he turned his head in a certain direction and frowned. They are almost here. He looked at the old man and told him, Sir Riwin, let's continue this conversation later. I need to deal with those guys first. With a concerned look, Riwin nodded. I will follow you soon, Your Highness. Alaric nodded. He then patted Dudu's head before he left the secret chamber. As soon as he left, Riwin put down the little girl and gently brushed her hair. Dudu, stay here and wait for Grandpa. Okay? I will go and help His Highness fight some bad people. Hearing this, Dudu's little eyes flashed with worry. She held her grandpa's hand and said with teary eyes, Grandpa, please come back soon. I don't like being alone. Riwin forced a smile and hugged her tightly. Grandpa will be back soon with more meat for you, so be good and wait for me. Dudu reluctantly nodded her head. Riwin stared affectionately at her before he left with heavy strides. Now left alone in the underground chamber, Dudu sat in the corner and ate the last strip of meat jerky, her eyes glistening with tears. Grandpa! Meanwhile, Alaric had already arrived at the entrance of the village where the warriors had gathered. Riwin arrived a moment later. Seeing them, the restless warriors immediately shut their mouths. Everyone, the enemies will be here soon. I suggest that you stay behind the walls. I will take care of them myself, Alaric announced in a non-negotiable tone. The warriors hesitated, but when they saw Riwin nodding his head, they acknowledged the command. Riwin went closer to Alaric and whispered with an anxious look. Your Highness, do you really plan to fight them on your own? Alaric nodded indifferently. Just stay behind the walls and make sure that no enemies will enter the village. Looking at his calm face, Riwin could only comply. Your subordinate understands. Chapter 352. Alaric's Energy Core. The warriors nervously observed the quiet forest beyond the village. They heard from Riwin that an army of 200 Harun warriors was coming. With their numbers, how could they defend against an army of that size? Some considered escaping, but when they saw the one-armed old knight standing on top of the walls, they immediately vanquished these thoughts. They felt ashamed of themselves. Suddenly, the ground trembled and everyone heard movements up ahead. The enemies are here, Riwin shouted with a grim look. He could finally see the 200 warriors from Harun, and their presence filled him with despair. At this moment, Alaric jumped off the wall, shocking everyone. What are you doing? Get back here, my lord. The village warriors anxiously called out to him, but Alaric was unmoved. He calmly stood while waiting for the enemy's arrival. Riwin watched his back, his eyebrows deeply furrowed. What is His Highness thinking? Soon, a barrage of arrows fell from the sky, tearing through the air, creating whistling sounds. Su! 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 The arrows were targeted at Alaric. Riwin was about to help him when Alaric suddenly made his move. He grabbed the two swords tied to his waist and brandished them in fluid motion. Whoosh! Whoosh! The arrows were sliced into tiny pieces before they fell to the ground. The village warriors were stunned upon seeing this. They didn't even see how Alaric had wielded his sword. As soon as they knew it, the arrows had already been sliced into countless pieces. Just then, warriors on horseback emerged from the forest. They roared while charging towards Alaric with unstoppable momentum. Alaric silently condensed his mana, forming an invisible layer of protection around his body. He might be invincible against weaker warriors, but there was no guarantee that he could defend against all attacks, so putting up this defensive mana wall was necessary. He realized that his control over mana had significantly improved, but this wasn't surprising. He now had an energy core which only transcendent knights possessed. This was an organ that acted as a vessel to hold mana. However, unlike the normal transcendent knights who had to go through a tough process to form their energy cores, Alaric skipped the step and directly formed his own. Furthermore, his energy core was solid and free of impurities, making it hold more mana. Alaric could feel this energy core pulsating intensely the more mana he released. The feeling was new to him and it filled him with excitement. No wonder Galliner and the others seemed to possess near inexhaustible mana. This is indeed a wondrous experience. Alaric imbued his swords with mana, activating the abilities engraved upon them. All of a sudden, the air around him turned cold. He then shot towards the approaching cavalrymen and released a series of slashes. Whoosh! 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 Blades of ice were summoned and pierced through the enemy's hearts, killing them in one shot. Stunned by the abilities he displayed, the cavalrymen tried to change their formation, but Alaric was one step ahead. He made another slashing motion. This time, he conjured dozens of thin, sharp icicles.
Su, su, su.
The cavalry failed to detect these tiny icicles, and when they noticed that something was amiss, it was already too late. Many of their comrades had fallen prey, their heads punctured with small holes. Seeing this, the leading elite knight realized that the young warrior who wore gaudy armor was a formidable foe. He is a transcendent knight. Protect your hearts and heads. Lift your shields, he shouted, raising his shield to his head. Hearing his words, his subordinates immediately lifted their shields. D. The commanding elite knight urged his horse to pounce at Alaric. With an indifferent look, Alaric stabbed his short sword into the ground and summoned a sharp pillar of ice. Rumble! The commanding elite knight was horrified. He quickly jumped off his horse, narrowly evading the sharp ice pillar. As for his horse, it couldn't evade in time and was ruthlessly cut in half. Seeing this, the commanding elite knight was terrified. Suddenly, he felt his body turning cold. What's happening? He thought to himself as he looked down only to realize that he had been stabbed. His chest was slowly turning into ice and his body was starting to freeze. Scared witless, he tried to lift his arms, but he was unable to move an inch. Soon, his body turned into an ice statue. At this moment, Alaric pulled his sword, breaking the ice statue into tiny fragments mixed with blood. The abrupt death of their commander stunned the remaining soldiers of Harun. Meanwhile, Rewin and the village warriors were watching the battle with stupefied gazes. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. Alaric faced the enemies alone and killed a fourth of them in less than a minute. He had even slain their commander in one move. His Highness is a transcendent knight, Rewin exclaimed with a mixture of excitement and shock. Hearing this, the village warriors glanced at him. Sir Rewin, did you just say His Highness? Just who is that person? Rewin knew that it was too late to hide the truth, so he told them everything. That young lord is His Highness Alaric Silversword. What? The village warriors were dumbfounded. While they were reeling in shock, the battle was starting to get more intense. Half of Harun's soldiers had already died and another elite knight had been slain. Alaric's sword was dripping with blood, but it soon froze and broke into tiny fragments of ice. The remaining soldiers of Harun pulled the reins of their horses while staring at the lone figure surrounded by ice shards and frozen blood. The surviving elite knight gritted his teeth and commanded. Retreat! Alaric sneered. Did I allow you to leave? Hundreds of icicles appeared above the soldiers of Harun like sharp stalactites hanging over their heads. With one command from Alaric, the icicles fell like arrows, piercing through the bodies of the warriors. Screams of panic echoed in all directions, but their voices soon died down. Chapter 353, Coaxing Dudu to Follow. Only one elite knight remained of the 200 warriors who had come. Wait. He glanced fearfully at Alaric while slowly backing away. Sweat trickled down his face as he tried to come up with a way to escape this situation. Why did you guys come to this village? Alaric asked as he walked closer to the trembling warrior. That? The elite knight hesitated, but realizing that this might be his last chance at survival, he gritted his teeth and told him the truth. We were tasked to capture the children in this village with ages below 5. Hearing this, Alaric furrowed his eyebrows. From his words, it seemed like whoever gave them the mission didn't want them to know about Dudu's real identity. But it was understandable. A half-dragon was a being that would attract attention wherever it went. After getting the information he needed from the man, Alaric didn't waste more time and stabbed him with his short sword. SSS-Rank. The elite knight's body turned into an ice sculpture before fragmenting into tiny pieces. Alaric sheathed his swords and turned around. He calmly walked towards the village under the terrified gazes of the village warriors. Your Highness! Rewin saluted him, his face showing deep respect and a trace of fear. Seeing this, village warriors recovered from their shock and quickly bowed to Alaric. "Your Highness!" Alaric ignored the village warriors and turned his head to Riwin. "Let's go back to the underground chamber. We need to discuss what to do with Dudu." Hearing this, Riwin's expression became somber. "Your subordinate understands." The two headed to the underground chamber. Upon their return, they saw Dudu huddled in the corner, her face covered in tears and snot. "Grandpa! Woo-woo!" The girl wailed miserably and rushed to Riwin, bawling her eyes out. The old knight felt guilty for leaving her alone. He consoled his granddaughter and hugged her tightly. "I thought you won't come back anymore." The little girl rubbed her eyes, her voice trembling with sorrow. "That's not true. Grandpa will never leave you." Riwin gently rubbed her head. "I saw the bad guys. There are many of them. I thought that." Dudu cried again when she remembered what she had seen. Riwin was surprised by her words. How did Dudu know? Alaric wasn't surprised by this. Dudu was a catastrophe-grade monster. Most of her abilities and powers might be sealed, but she still possessed the senses of a powerful beast. "Dudu has probably awakened some of her abilities," he told the old man. Riwin looked worried when he heard this. He had seen what happened to Dudu's father. Even a powerful beast like him was caught and forced into submission. He was afraid that Dudu would experience the same fate. Thinking about this, he looked at Alaric and pleaded, "Your Highness, please bring Dudu with you. Letting her stay here is too dangerous. With this old and crippled body of mine, protecting her would be difficult." "Grandpa, are you abandoning me?" "Woo-woo." Dudu stared at her grandfather, sobbing uncontrollably. Riwin patted her back, whispering sweet words to pacify the little girl. Alaric squatted and patted the little girl's head. "Dudu, staying in this village will be dangerous. More of those bad guys might come. How about coming with me? I have a newborn little sister. Once she grows up, you can play with her all you want. You can also eat plenty of meat in our house." Dudu was initially unimpressed, but when she heard that she would have a playmate and even plenty of meat to eat, she became interested. "Handsome uncle, what was your name again? Can I really eat meat?" Alaric almost fell on his butt when he heard this. "Dudu, don't be rude to His Highness." Riwin immediately scolded her. Alaric forced a smile and nodded. "Of course, there are plenty of wild animals that we can hunt outside my home. You can eat plenty of meat there." Dudu wiped off her tears and snot with her arm before she responded cautiously. "Okay, but Grandpa must come with me. Otherwise, I won't go with you." Riwin was about to say something, but he closed his mouth when he saw Alaric raising his hand. "No problem." Alaric agreed without hesitation. Riwin was a knight, so bringing him along would be great. As for his crippled arm, Samaya's ultimate heal could restore it. After discussing for a while, they agreed on leaving with Alaric, but Riwin was still worried about the village. "Your Highness, what about the people here? Without me here, one fatal-grade monster would be enough to destroy the village." Although monsters rarely come to the village, there were a few occasions when they encountered them. It was Riwin who handled those beasts since the village warriors were just too weak to fight them. They might be able to defend against weaker monsters, but fatal-grade monsters were a different story. Furthermore, Harun might send another unit to the village in search of Dudu. Alaric smiled faintly. "Don't worry. I will send a letter to the local aristocrats and tell them to send warriors to defend the village." With his current identity, no noble household would dare to go against his words. He also planned to improve the living conditions of the village and have it registered as part of Astania. Although the village would have to pay an annual grain tax, it would be protected in exchange. Alaric told Riwin about his plans, which made the old knight feel at ease about leaving. "Your Highness, can I inform the villagers before we leave?" Riwin asked. It didn't sit well with him to just leave without informing the villagers. The people here had been his neighbors for decades, so he developed a strong attachment to them. "You can, but we need to leave soon, so make it quick." Alaric nodded. His mission was still active, so there might be more places that had been attacked. "Yes, Your Highness." Chapter 354. Small Progress. Heading back to Birming Island. A few hours later, almost the entire village gathered at the village gate to send off Alaric, Rewin, and Dudu. Seeing his friends and neighbors gathering like this, Rewin felt sentimental. He bid everyone farewell and exchanged words with them for the last time. "I am ready, Your Highness. I'm sorry for making you wait." Rewin bowed his head apologetically. Alaric shook his head. "It's all right." He then turned his head to Dudu and smiled at her. "Dudu, are you ready to leave?" Unlike her grandpa Rewin, who had lived in the village for decades, Dudu didn't share the same sentimental feelings. She had always stayed in the underground chamber and rarely went out, so she wasn't particularly close to anyone. With a nod of her head, she replied, "I am ready, uncle." Alaric no longer bothered to correct her. She would eventually learn how to speak properly once she received an education. "Good." Alaric patted her head. He lifted his head and brought his fingers to his mouth to produce a bird-like cry. Soon after he issued this unusual call, a deafening roar reverberated above the sky, scaring the villagers. In the next moment, a huge beast revealed itself behind the clouds, flapping its feathered wings while looking down at them with its beastly eyes. The villagers were terrified when they saw the massive creature. Most of them couldn't handle the pressure it released, forcing them to kneel in submission. A few who had stronger willpower managed to remain standing, their legs trembling, and their eyes shaking with terror. Rewin was similarly scared, but looking at Alaric's calm demeanor, he seemed to have realized something. "Your Highness, is that beast your—" His voice trailed off since the massive beast suddenly swooped down. Whoosh! Alaric shielded the villagers with his mana to prevent them from being injured by the stray debris brought by the wind caused by Zephyr's descent. "Whoa!" Dudu didn't show any fear when she saw Zephyr. Instead, she felt excited, her eyes showing how delighted she was. Upon landing, Zephyr tilted its head and looked at the little girl in confusion. Could feel a strong resonance from her as if they shared a common bond. Similarly, Dudu could feel this connection, but she was too young to understand these things. In her innocent mind, she just felt that the creature wouldn't harm her. "Let's go." Alaric carried Dudu before jumping on Zephyr's back. Seeing this, Rewin hesitated, but he quickly followed after seeing Alaric's encouraging smile. "Goodbye, everyone. If fate permits, we might see each other again." This was Alaric's last message to the villagers before he commanded Zephyr to fly. Whoosh! A child's joyous laughter soon echoed on the horizon. "They left. I wonder if we can see them again. We live in two separate worlds. The chances of that happening are close to impossible. At least we can brag that we once spoke with His Highness." The villagers felt emotional as they watched the giant beast fly beyond the sky. It was only when they could no longer see the beast's figure did the villagers return to their homes. "Be careful, Dudu. Make sure that you hold on to His Highness." Rewin reminded Dudu when he saw her fearlessly standing, imitating Alaric's posture. Alaric chuckled at the little girl's antics. Both she and Rewin were protected by his mana, so the fierce winds didn't affect them. At this moment, the system which had been silent for a while finally sent him a series of notifications. Undersir. Mission complete. Rewards 1000 battle points, 50 XP, 50 stat points. Random trait upgrade card X1. Undersir. Alaric smiled faintly upon seeing this. Galliner and the others must have completed the task. Now that the mission has been completed, Alaric commanded Zephyr to head back to Birming Island. Rewin noticed the change in their path, but he didn't ask him anything. Alaric was secretly pleased with his tactfulness. While holding Dudu's hand, he used the random trait upgrade card. "Congratulations! Your trait hunting, D, has been promoted to hunting, C. Alaric Silversword, Transcendent Knight EXP, 0, 50/5000. Potential S. Traits, Horseback Riding B, Swordsmanship, SSS. Close Combat, B. Archery, D. Hunting C. Tracking C. Sixth Sense, C. Monster Affinity C. Mana Gathering C. Appraisal B. Strength, 300. Stamina, 300. Agility, 300. Vitality, 300. Endurance, 300. Mana, 300. Battle points, 0, 1000. Stat points, 50. Requirements for the next advancement: 5,000 EXP, 500 in all attributes, and 25,000 battle points. It seems like fulfilling all the requirements will take me a long time. Alaric smiled bitterly when he saw the small increase in his progress. He closed the screen and conversed with Dudu to pass the time. Dudu, have you been to a lake before? What's a lake, uncle? Can that be eaten? Dudu responded with a line of drool at the corner of her lips. Alaric chuckled at her words. A lake is a vast body of water that contains many aquatic creatures. He tried to explain to her, but the little girl only revealed a look of utter confusion. Your Highness, please be patient with Dudu. She only turned 3 this year. Riwin reminded him with a wry smile. With 2 people accompanying him on the flight, Alaric was no longer bored. 3 days later, a beautiful island surrounded by a vast lake entered their view. So beautiful! Dudu was amazed by the beautiful scenery. She had never ventured far from the village before, so everything was new to her. In the past 3 days, they have been to a few nice places, but this island's beauty filled her with boundless excitement. So this is what Birming Island looks like from above. It truly is a wonderful place. Riwin sighed in awe. He had been to this island town before, but he had never seen it from above. Hold tight. We are descending to the island. Alaric's voice drifted into their ears. Hearing this, Dudu quickly held onto Alaric's leg, clinging tightly like a koala. On the other hand, Riwin grabbed firmly on Zephyr's feathers, afraid that he might fall. Whoosh! Chapter 355. A long way to go. As soon as they descended, a group of people came to greet them. Leading this group were the mayor and the viscountess. Welcome back, Your Highness, they greeted in unison. Alaric jumped off Zephyr's back and exchanged pleasantries with them. He also introduced the group to Riwin and Dudu, who enthusiastically welcomed them. They were curious about the identity of this little girl and old knight, but Alaric didn't seem to have the intention of telling them anything more. A moment later, they gathered in the VIP hall inside the town hall to discuss the deal they had agreed beforehand. The Viscountess, Michelle Catherine, had already prepared all the necessary documents, so the proceedings went smoothly. All that was left was for Alaric to give his seal and his signature to finalize the agreement. It is my pleasure to work with you, Your Highness. Michelle lowered her head, clearly pleased with the results. The pleasure is mine, Alaric responded with a smile. Michelle was a proud woman and he could see the ambition in her eyes, but it wasn't the kind of ambition that would make one repulsed. Alaric found this side of her interesting since she was different compared to most of the ladies he knew. The only one who shared a similar trait with her was Ivana. Thinking about Ivana, Alaric felt the urge to visit her. Your Highness, the people on the list are ready to follow you. Just give me the word and I will send them to North Pine Town. Michelle's voice drifted into his ears, pushing him out of his reverie. Alaric glanced at her and waved his hand. There is no hurry. The journey from here towards the northern region is filled with peril, so we cannot be careless about this. Although the empire was relatively safe, there existed small factions of outlaws who would prey on weak caravans. Some of them were even protected by the nobility so they could evade the pursuit of local authority. Alaric couldn't leave the talented engineers and craftsmen defenseless on their trip to North Pine Town. I will send word to my subordinates. Once they are here, then your people can follow us to the northern region. Alaric added. Hearing this, Michelle blamed herself. I was thoughtless. It's all right. There's no harm done. The two discussed different matters and their topics soon drifted towards the recent invasion of Haroun. Your Highness, how do you think Haroun will respond after this defeat? Michelle asked. She had received word from other nobles that there had been numerous towns and cities that had been attacked. This had filled her with a sense of urgency. With Birming Island being on the westernmost borders, it would be the first one to face retaliatory attacks from Harun. Considering their military power, they wouldn't be able to hold out if Harun decided on a full-scale invasion. Sensing her worry, Alaric reassured her. I have already informed the northern houses about Harun's invasion. By now, the imperial family should be preparing its troops to reinforce the borders in case Harun attempts another invasion. He had also informed Lucas and his two mothers about this, so they must have already gathered the northern houses for a meeting. Michelle breathed a sigh of relief upon hearing his words. With the support of the imperial family and the northern houses, she would be more confident in defending their territory. Days passed and the news about Harun's attacks had already circulated across the empire. The nobility and martial houses had different reactions regarding this. Some offered their military support, while others opted to preserve their own strength. Alaric, who was in Birming Island, was unaware of the turmoil this event had caused. He had underestimated the fear of the nobility and their desire for power. 2 weeks later, in the training ground of House Jimena, Alaric was currently performing his daily mission. Surprisingly, his daily mission was still the same and even the rewards remained as it was. This left him with a sour taste in his mouth, since this would mean more time before his next advancement. 1,000 weighted push-ups ballot box with check. 1,000 weighted pull-ups ballot box with check. 1,000 weighted squats ballot box with check. 1 hour weighted planking ballot box with check.
1000 mana infuset vertical slashes kotak pilihan bertanda centang 2. 1000 mana infuset horizontal slashes kotak pilihan bertanda centang 2.
1,000 mana infused diagonal slashes ballot box with check. 1,000 mana infused stabs ballot box with check. Daily mission complete. You received 20 battle points. You received 3 stat points. You received 3 EXP. You have gained 1 mana through your trait mana gathering. C. Alaric inspected his progress and felt a wave of exhaustion. Going by this speed, it would take me more than 3 to 5 years to fulfill the requirements for my next advancement. Alaric shook his head with a wry smile. He then sheathed his swords and removed his armor. Uncle, have some water. Now dressed in a pink noble dress, a smiling Dudu walked towards him while holding a glass of water. The little girl looked thin when she first arrived at the island town, but after more than 2 weeks of being well-fed, she had grown noticeably chubbier. Looking at the little glutton, Alaric couldn't help but smile. What do you want from me this time? Alaric asked as he took the glass of water from her hands. This girl would only come to him when she needed something, so Alaric was feeling suspicious. Startled that she had been seen through, Dudu didn't know how to respond. Alaric was amused to see her hesitant. He ruffled her hair and said, "Don't be shy." Dudu lifted her head and stared at him with her big adorable eyes. "Uncle, I want to eat the fish in the pond. Can you help me catch some?" Hearing this, Alaric's mouth twitched. There was a man-made pond at the southern edge of House Jimena's estate. Alaric couldn't allow her to do everything she wanted. She might develop a bad habit and grow up to be a spoiled child. Dudu, the fish in that pond aren't meant for consumption. If you eat them, you might upset your stomach. The little glutton was disappointed by his words. Is that so? What a pity. Looking at her shaking her head in regret, Alaric was amused. Chapter 356. The Abilities of a Transcendent Knight. After another 3 days, Galliner and the others finally arrived at Birming Island, but he didn't hurry to leave since there was still a mountain of tasks to do. Many cities, towns, and villages had been attacked by Harun, leaving countless families homeless. There were also many who had lost their loved ones, truly a tragedy. Alaric couldn't leave the residence like this. It didn't sit well with him as someone who carried the blood of the imperial family. He felt that he had the responsibility to take care of the people. At this moment, Alaric was in a meeting with various Western leaders. They were discussing how to handle the large number of refugees. Your Highness, most of our territories were damaged from the invasion. We would need resources to repair the infrastructure. I am afraid that it would be difficult to take in those refugees. One of the Western lords spoke in a regretful tone. Some shared the same sentiment, and they also voiced out their concerns about accepting the refugees. Alaric understood their difficulties, so he didn't make things hard for them. Forcing them to accept those refugees would only earn their discontent. There are more than 10,000 refugees. Accepting them is indeed a heavy burden to these noble houses. Is there really no other way? He thought of bringing those people to the northern region, but the distance was too long and some of the refugees might not survive the trip. While he was deep in his thoughts, a messenger suddenly came in with an urgent expression. "My apologies for the disturbance, Your Highness. I have something important to report." Alaric turned his head and signaled for the man to speak. Seeing this, the messenger immediately said, "His Highness Giovanni has arrived. With him is the Western Sword Marquis, Lord Marco." Hearing this, everyone squinted their eyes. The arrival of another prince might not be good for them. Furthermore, the second prince, Giovanni Estania, didn't have a good reputation. Some leaders revealed expressions of anticipation. On the other hand, Alaric had a serene look. If it were before, he might have felt anxious when facing the second prince, but now that he was a transcendent knight, his worries were gone. Moreover, he had also received reports from his subordinates about the second prince's actions. Giovanni was showing signs of change in his personality. For him, this was a good thing since Giovanni had played a big part in the civil war that happened in his past life. If he somehow turned over a new leaf, the civil war might be avoided. "All right, you may leave." Alaric dismissed the messenger, who left right away. The atmosphere became a bit tense. Everyone was worried that the two princes would clash. If that happened, they didn't know which side to take. A quarter of an hour later, Giovanni entered the VIP hall with Marco. Upon their arrival, everyone immediately rose to their feet and greeted them. "Welcome, Your Highness." "Welcome, Lord Marco." Everyone could tell that Marco was injured based on his pale complexion. Despite this, the Marquis took his time to greet the people present one by one. He exuded none of the arrogance that most in his position possessed. He carried himself humbly, making the Western lords feel relaxed. Meanwhile, the second prince merely nodded his head to acknowledge their presence. He then turned his head to Alaric and approached him briskly. Some people revealed a look of interest, waiting for a good show to watch. Galliner was about to stop him when Alaric raised his hand, signaling him to stand back. "Cousin, I am glad to see you unharmed." Alaric stood up and smiled at Giovanni. Giovanni furrowed his eyebrows, feeling a slight sense of discomfort in his heart. Deep inside, he still couldn't accept Alaric as part of the imperial family. However, the other party displayed unparalleled talent, which forced him to acknowledge Alaric. "Is it true that you have become a transcendent knight?" Giovanni asked while staring deeply at him. When he first received this news, he found it incredulous. Alaric wasn't even 20, so he couldn't bring himself to believe it. Even someone as talented as the Emperor took a few decades before he became a transcendent knight. Everyone turned their gaze to Alaric. They had also heard of this news, but they didn't dare confirm it out of respect for Alaric's identity. Sensing everyone's curious gazes, Alaric exhaled a breath and smiled faintly. He then released a wisp of mana from his energy core to his fingertips. Knights couldn't freely control mana. Most of them could only use it to strengthen their bodies and improve their health. As for elite knights, they could control mana to some extent. They could transfer their mana into their equipment to make it more powerful. They could also cover their bodies with mana for additional defense. The degree of control varied from one to another. The greater their strength, the more freely they could control their mana. On the other hand, transcendent knights had already surpassed this level. Unlike knights and elite knights, they possessed energy cores which gave them the ability to store more mana. With a huge surplus of mana at their disposal, they could wield abilities far beyond what one could imagine. Some formidable transcendent knights could form an affinity with certain elements, making their mana more potent and powerful. However, not everyone had this kind of luck. In the entire empire, only a handful of transcendent knights had formed affinities with the elements of nature. At this moment, what Alaric had revealed was the power of his energy core, making everyone feel stupefied. Giovanni felt a mixture of emotions upon seeing him display his ability. So it is real, he mumbled. Alaric retracted his mana. Why don't you join our discussion? Maybe you can help us think of a solution for the issues at hand. Giovanni recovered from his stupor and absent-mindedly nodded his head. Fine. Alaric grinned and signaled at everyone to settle down. Once Giovanni had taken his seat, Alaric announced, "Let's resume the meeting." Chapter 357. Getting Giovanni's support. Since no one is willing to take in those refugees, why don't you just send them to a remote village? I can help you procure the necessary materials and supplies for the redevelopment of the village. The second prince suggested, his words drawing everyone's astonishment. Is this really the second prince that they knew? Why did it seem like he was a different person? Everyone couldn't believe that those words came out of his mouth. Meanwhile, Alaric rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Giovanni's suggestion would cost them a lot of money, but if the redevelopment was successful, they could turn a village into a town. Thinking about this, a certain village came to his mind. In that case, I will also help with the procurement of materials and manpower. Alaric stated his willingness to join the redevelopment project. He then told them about the village which wasn't recorded on the map. What do you think? Alaric turned his head to Giovanni. All right, if there really is a village in that place, then we can choose it for the project. Giovanni didn't reject his proposal. He felt that Alaric was trying to smooth out their relationship. He wasn't averse to the idea, and he also thought that it was an opportunity to establish a good image with the Western Lords. They discussed back and forth with the Western Lords, soon joining the conversation. 2 hours later, the meeting concluded on a good note. What are your plans now? Giovanni asked as they stepped out of the VIP hall. Alaric was about to respond when a sudden notification appeared in front of him. Under. Mission, Haroun's invasion. Mission difficulty, hard. Learning about the defeat of their troops, the imperial family of Haroun was furious. They are gathering their troops in preparation for a bigger attack. Gather your troops and stop their invasion. Mission rewards, 1,500 battle points, 30 stat points, 30 EXP. Random trait card X1. Seeing this, Alaric's expression became serious as he responded. I will gather troops to reinforce the western borders. I don't think that Haroun would simply accept this loss. Giovanni frowned upon hearing this. Are you saying that they will launch a full-scale war against Estania? Haroun was a bigger nation compared to Estania. They possessed more lands and more resources. A war against a nation of its size wouldn't be favorable for Estania. Alaric nodded. By now, they should be preparing their troops, so we still have time to get ready. He paused his steps and looked at the second prince. Giovanni, I know that we have our differences, but we must put aside our conflicts. Cannot face Haroun alone. We need to stand together to defend our nation. Hearing his bold proclamation, Giovanni's heart was stirred. He stared deeply at his younger cousin and nodded his head. Fine. Alaric was ecstatic. With Giovanni's support, defending the western borders would be a lot easier. This guy had more private troops than House Silversword, and he also had the support of his faction. I need to keep a close watch on this guy. Who knows? Alaric still couldn't fully trust the second prince. After all, this man was an enemy in his past life. Many of his friends and allies died because of the choices that Giovanni made. In the next few days, Alaric instructed his subordinates to purchase materials for the redevelopment of Dudu's home village. Many merchants and Western houses accepted this business since it was of considerable value. Furthermore, they also wanted to take the chance to ingratiate themselves with Alaric and House Silversword. At this moment, Alaric was accompanying Dudu to play. He wanted to know if there was a way to unseal her abilities, but after several days, he still hadn't found a clue on how to do it. Never mind, let's just let nature take its course. He thought to himself as he patted the little girl's head. Uncle, look at the fish over there. They look so fat and delicious. Dudu's excited voice drifted into his ears. He lowered his head and saw her drooling at the sight of the plump gold fish. Dudu, we can't eat those fish. They taste terrible. How about following me to the lake? We can catch a big fish there. The little girl was initially disappointed, but when she heard the second half of his words, her eyes brightened. Can we really catch a big fish there? Of course. Alaric nodded as he ruffled her hair. Then what are we waiting for? Hurry up, uncle. The little imp pulled his hand and urged him to move. All right, all right. Alaric helplessly shook his head. He never thought that looking after a child would be this difficult. He wondered what would happen once his sister was born. Thinking about this, he could already imagine the disaster that would take place if she teamed up with Dudu. Riwin watched them leave with a relieved smile. He still harbored some hesitation to follow Alaric, but after seeing how good he was to Dudu in the past few weeks, his worries vanished. The old man lifted his head and looked at the horizon. My daughter, you don't need to worry about your child. With His Highness protecting her, she will always be safe. Meanwhile, Alaric and Dudu went to the coastal port to rent a small boat. The little girl was jumping in excitement as she watched the vast lake. You must be careful, Your Highness. There are some dangerous monsters in the lake. If you encounter them, you must return immediately. An old fisherman warned him. He had Zephyr with him, so Alaric wasn't worried about the sea monsters, but he still nodded at the fisherman. Soon, Alaric and Dudu jumped onto the small boat they rented. Upon entering the lake, Dudu poked his arm and excitedly said, Uncle, let's go there. I can see so many big fish there. Alaric followed the direction she had pointed and squinted his eyes. Her perception is really good. He was surprised by her keen eyesight. All right, hold on tight so you won't fall into the water. Chapter 358. A Mountain of Tasks. With the system's new mission, Alaric decided to delay his return. As for the engineers and craftsmen, Alaric sent a team of 200 warriors led by Butch. House Jimena also sent an additional team of 100 warriors to escort them. With a transcendent knight like Butch leading them, no one would dare to attack their group. Even if someone was brave enough to try, the 300 warriors under Butch wouldn't sit idly by. In the blink of an eye, a fortnight elapsed. Word had already spread about the possible retaliation of Haroun, so the Western lords gathered their troops along the borders, showing their determination to defend their lands. At this moment, inside the study in House Jimena's guest mansion, Alaric was enjoying his morning tea when he heard a series of knocks on the door. He put down the teacup and calmly said, Come in. Michelle Catherine in her light armor entered respectfully and lowered her head. Your Highness, we have gathered a total of 50,000 troops at the Ackland Pass. By now, they should have set up camp and laid down some defenses as well as traps. She reported. Hearing this, Alaric nodded and gestured for her to take her seat. Michelle understood his cue and took her seat. Upon taking her seat, she continued. Your Highness, we have sent dozens of scout teams into key locations to monitor the possible routes of Haroun's troops. Good. Just keep me updated and report to me immediately if there is any movement on the enemy's side. Alaric had been busy with the war preparations in the past 2 weeks, so he wasn't able to do his daily missions. Yes, Your Highness. Alaric gave her a few more instructions before he sent her out. Looking at the stacks of documents on the table, he let out a heavy sigh. This is more exhausting than I expected. If I become the next emperor, would I not have time to do my daily missions anymore? Although he had been recognized as the third heir to the throne, Alaric didn't have any plans on becoming the next emperor. If he were swamped with a ton of tasks, he would have no time to complete his missions. However, he didn't mention his thoughts to anyone. He still needed the support of the noble houses to accomplish his goals. I should inspect the supplies and equipment. Thinking about this, he stepped out of the guest mansion and headed to the coastal port where a large cargo ship was docked. Upon his arrival, the workers and the warriors at the site immediately greeted him. Your Highness! Yishin, the naval commander of Birming Island, hurried over to his side. Your Highness, what brings you here? The guy was overseeing the transport of the supplies and the equipment, making him one of the busiest people in the island town. His skin had become more tanned after being constantly exposed to the sun. Looking at this guy, Alaric was very pleased. I just came here to do an inspection. Has there been any accidents during the transportation of the supplies? He casually inquired. Hearing this, Yishin wasn't nervous. He had inspected every box to make sure that nothing was missing. Everything is going smoothly, Your Highness. Some of our people are complaining about the workload, but other than that, there have been no major issues. Alaric nodded. This was within his expectations. Not bad. Do your job well and you will be rewarded. As for those people voicing their complaints, his face suddenly turned serious. Replace them. There are plenty of people willing to do their jobs for half the salary. If they cause you trouble, I give you the authority to punish them. Alaric sneered. Looking at his stern face, Yishin nodded with a grave look. Your subordinate understands. Alaric turned his head to the cargo ship and asked, When is the ship leaving? Yishin thought for a moment before he replied. There are still a few dozen boxes left to be arranged, so around half an hour, I think. Alaric nodded thoughtfully. He wanted to visit Ackland Pass to inspect the preparations of the troops, but he had more important matters to attend to. I should send Redden instead. The guy's been complaining a lot lately. I might as well give him something to do. My ears are getting calluses from hearing his complaints. Recalling that guy, Alaric was exasperated. Redden was relatively quiet when he first came to North Pine Town, but when he became more familiar with everyone, he turned into a chatterbox, even sometimes making Alaric feel vexed. I will send a team of warriors to escort this batch of supplies. Send word to your subordinates to avoid confusion, Alaric instructed. I obey your commands. Alaric didn't linger and left after excusing himself. Yishin stared at Alaric's disappearing figure before relaying his instructions. I need to warn those guys not to cause trouble. It won't be good if they confront His Highness's people. Meanwhile, Alaric returned to the guest mansion to get some well-needed rest. Dudu, come here and give me a massage. Alaric searched for the little girl as soon as he arrived. But Dudu is still watching the fish. The little girl replied in a grumbling tone, but she still obediently followed Alaric. Redden and his deputy commander Fredrin brought a team of 50 knights to the coastal port. Their intimidating presence made the workers at the port feel nervous. Who are those guys? I don't recognize them. Can't you see their banners? They are from House Silversword. They are soldiers under His Highness Alaric. Hearing the commotion, Yishin immediately rushed to inspect the situation. He saw Redden's cavalry group approaching the cargo ship. They were fully equipped and ready for combat. Looking at their banners, his eyes flashed. They are His Highness people. He no longer dawdled and rushed over to greet them. Hello, everyone. I am Yishin. Were you sent by His Highness? Now that he had taken a closer look at them, Yishin realized that the weakest in this group were knights. Chapter 359. Suspicious mercenaries. This guy, he is overflowing with mana. Yishin furrowed his eyebrows as he looked at the person leading these 50 warriors. He failed to discern the other party's realm, so he guessed that this man was stronger than he was. A transcendent knight. You must be Naval Commander Yishin. I've heard of you from His Highness. I am Redden, the commander of this small unit. Redden responded indifferently. He then showed his token to confirm his identity. So it's Lord Redden. Please follow me. I have already made arrangements for your accommodation for the trip. Yishin invited them to the cargo ship. Redden nodded and followed him without saying anything. Soon, all the supplies and equipment had been loaded onto the ship. Since there were special guests present, Yishin decided to join the transportation to make sure that nothing would go wrong. I don't think they are just sent here to escort this batch of supplies. His Highness must have instructed them to make a trip to Ackland Pass. Yishin thought to himself. A few hours later, they reached their destination where an escort team of about 500 warriors was waiting. Unload the shipment, Yishin barked at his men. Meanwhile, Redden had already instructed his men to get off the ship. Sir Redden, someone wants to speak with you. Hearing this, Redden, who was resting his eyes, frowned. Who is it? It's the leader of the escort team. Redden nodded and replied with a deep look. Bring him to me. A moment later, his subordinates returned with a bald middle-aged man wearing steel armor. Redden glanced at the man and mentally noted his strength. Peak elite knight, a bit weaker than Fredrin. Quite the tough guy. While he was observing the bald middle-aged man, the latter was also observing him. I can't sense his aura. He is at least a peak elite knight like me. He clicked his tongue. With his sharp senses, Redden heard this, but he acted like nothing happened. After a moment of silence, the bald middle-aged man opened his mouth. Greetings, sir. He cupped his fist to show his respect. I am Oleg, the commander of Red Serpent mercenaries. We are responsible for escorting the supplies and equipment to Ackland Pass. Oleg paused for a moment before he asked while staring deeply at Redden. May I know your identity, sir? Redden smiled faintly and cupped his fist. I am Redden, an elite knight under His Highness Alaric's command. We are here to join you in this trip to Ackland Pass. Fredrin, who was next to him, raised an eyebrow, but he didn't say anything. Meanwhile, Oleg's eyes flashed for a moment upon hearing this. He then let out a chuckle. So it's Sir Redden. With you joining this trip, everyone will definitely feel safe. The two exchanged words while trying to gauge each other. After about a quarter of an hour, Oleg excused himself and left. As soon as he was gone, Fredrin asked in a low voice, Why did you lie to him? He couldn't understand why Redden would lie about his identity. He felt that this guy was up to something. Redden kept his gaze on Oleg's distant figure as he replied in a meaningful tone. Fredrin, I think I understand now why His Highness sent us here. Fredrin was baffled by his words, but Redden didn't bother to clarify himself and just chuckled in amusement. Over an hour later, all the crates had already been loaded onto the dozens of horse-drawn wagons. Everything has been loaded, Sir Redden. Yishin came to report the completion of their task. All right, you may go. We will handle the rest. Redden waved his hand. I wish you a safe trip, sir. Yishin saluted before he headed into the ship. With all the crates loaded onto the wagons, Oleg soon issued the command to depart. He didn't even bother to consult Redden, which was a clear show of strength and disregard. Looking at Oleg's arrogant behavior, Redden didn't seem to care and just revealed a look of interest. This time, Fredrin could sense that there was something fishy about the mercenary commander, but he didn't say anything to avoid drawing attention. Sir Redden must have discovered something earlier. He thought while keeping his eyes on the mercenaries. Relax. You look so tense. Redden's voice drifted into his ears, startling him. He looked at Redden and asked in a whispering tone, Sir, is there something wrong with these mercenaries? Redden shook his head. I'm not sure, but that Oleg guy is definitely hiding something. Let's just wait and see for now. Tell everyone to stay alert. Fredrin narrowed his eyes and nodded. Yes, sir. Ackland Pass was located 60 miles away from Birming Island. A trip on foot would take them 2 to 4 days depending on the weather and the conditions of the road. Nothing significant happened on the first day of the journey, but when night came, something unexpected happened. Enemy ambush. Defend the wagons. Don't let them get close to the wagons. At this moment, Redden suddenly smiled. They are here. He then gestured to Fredrin and barked out. Gather the group. We must protect the wagons. Yes, sir. Fredrin nodded and pulled the reins of his horse before storming off to deliver his message to the group. Chaos erupted with the unexpected ambush. The mercenaries were undisciplined, so they reacted slowly to the situation. Moreover, Redden also noticed unusual movements from Oleg's side. Seems like the mercenary group is divided. A series of thoughts flashed in his mind when he saw this. Oleg must be a spy from Harun, but not all members of the Red Serpent mercenary group are aware of this. Is he planning to use this confusion to destroy the supplies? Thinking about this, Redden no longer hesitated. Sheeing, he drew his sword and squeezed his legs, urging his horse to move. Oleg, you son of a bitch! How dare you betray Estania? He bellowed, his voice echoing in all directions. Chapter 360. Swift Cleanup. Oleg was stunned when he felt the sudden outburst of mana. This power. He's a transcendent knight. He looked at the approaching Redden with an alarmed look. He didn't have the confidence to fight a transcendent knight. Damn it! I failed to consider this. I should have waited for reinforcements to come before taking action. Block him! He shouted to his men. He could only hope that his subordinates could buy him enough time to escape. Thinking about this, he didn't even hesitate for a second. He pulled the reins and urged his horse to flee in the opposite direction. He could hear his subordinates' screams of terror and the sound of something closely approaching him. He turned his head and was terrified. Behind him was Redden brandishing a pair of swords. No warrior was able to stop him. All those who had blocked his path were cut into pieces, leaving only their horses. "You can't get away from me, Oleg," Redden shouted, his voice trembling with excitement, making Oleg feel an overwhelming sense of terror. More warriors blocked Redden's path, encircling him in a defensive formation. Seeing this, Redden sneered, and disdain was evident in his eyes. A bunch of trash. He waved his swords, killing each person with a single slash. Whoosh! Whoosh! In the next moment, everyone who had surrounded him fell from their horses. Not even one of them was left alive. After taking care of those warriors, Redden's momentum didn't drop. He rushed towards Oleg with unstoppable force, his long red cape fluttering fiercely against the wind. Oleg's heart sank to the bottom of the abyss. He knew that it was only a matter of time before Redden would catch up to him. Knowing that the situation was hopeless, his eyes flashed with determination. He pulled the reins, forcing his horse to take a turn. He then pulled a javelin from his back and threw it at Redden. Whoosh! Redden snorted at his futile attempt at resistance. He released a slash that broke the javelin apart. What? Oleg was stunned. He had used all his strength in that throw, but it didn't even impede Redden's movements. While he was distracted, Redden took the chance to deliver a stab to his chest. SSS-Rank. Oleg felt his body stiffening as he glanced at Redden's indifferent face with a look of disbelief. How did you know about our plan? He muttered in a trembling voice. He could sense his mana slowly dissipating after being stabbed. In that moment, he knew that his death was imminent. Looking at Oleg's contorted expression, Redden suddenly pulled his sword. Sheik! Blood gushed out of Oleg's wound, making him feel dizzy. He quickly applied pressure to his wound, hoping to slow down the bleeding. Are there more spies like you hidden among our forces? Tell me and I will give you a quick death. Redden's cold voice drifted into his ears. Pale-faced, Oleg lifted his head and smiled. Blood was leaking from the corner of his lips. You guys don't even know what kind of foolish mistake you have made. Cough. He was losing grip of his spear, but he refused to let go. This was his last bit of pride as a warrior. Redden stared at him in amusement. It was as if he had heard the most ridiculous joke. You don't know what you're talking about, Oleg. Estonia is no longer the same weak nation as it was before. He shook his head, his voice filled with contempt. Oleg furrowed his eyebrows. He was baffled by Redden's confidence. Harun was recognized as one of the strongest empires among the surrounding nations. On the other hand, Estonia didn't even have a history as long as it has. Moreover, Estonia had always faced the attacks of monsters from the enchanted woodlands, leaving it with thousands of casualties each year, not to mention the battles it had faced from neighboring empires. I will give you one last chance to speak. You have 5 seconds. Redden stared deeply at him while silently imbuing mana into his swords. Oleg didn't respond and just smiled at him. Seeing this, Redden let out a sigh. He waved his sword, slashing Oleg's neck cleanly with a single strike. Whoosh! Oleg's head fell to the ground with a thud and his headless corpse soon followed. Thud. Redden didn't even bother to spare him a second glance. He turned his head to take a look at the situation. At this moment, most of Oleg's men had already been killed. The remaining few dozen were huddled tightly together, desperately trying to defend themselves. Soon all the enemies had been killed. A stern-faced Fredrin approached Redden on horseback to give his report. All our subordinates are safe. 5 of them sustained injuries, but nothing life-threatening. Hearing this, Redden nodded indifferently. What about the mercenaries? He asked while looking at the restless mercenaries. There were 500 of them at the start of the trip, but not even half of them had survived. They couldn't even look at each other in the eye, afraid that another one would betray them. Fredrin shook his head. It is tough for them. There is still no official notice from their side, but I estimate that over 300 have died in battle. This was within Redden's expectations. He tapped Fredrin's shoulder and instructed, "Tell our injured brothers to recuperate. As for the rest, tell them to keep an eye on the mercenaries. We will sleep in turns." The mercenaries couldn't be trusted. He also believed that some of Oleg's men might have blended with the survivors. "Yes, sir." Fredrin acknowledged the command with a salute. Suddenly, they felt a presence approaching them. They both turned their heads and saw an injured elite knight who looked to be in his mid-40s. "Greetings, Sir Redden, Sir Fredrin. This lowly warrior is called Del. I'm the deputy commander of the Red Serpent mercenary group." The man introduced himself with a salute. "I'm here to give you a report of our losses.